Welcome to the moment that changed everything, where we interview notable creative people to gain insights into how they got started and learn more about the moments that shaped them and their careers. Today we sit down with Gary Watson, freelance creative director and writer. Gary has held senior positions at some highly creative shops across the country, including Zulu Alpha Kilo, Taxi, Capital C, and DentsuBos.
Whether the medium is like experiential or whether it's a digital medium, I think fundamentally it still comes down to just what's the insight. I think the insight and the execution on that insight still needs to be, that human truth.
In this episode, we tackle a subject that is increasingly top of mind with senior freelance staff, namely ageism and the impact of fewer intermediates in creative departments. We also get into his sage advice for young creatives, the state of content marketing, and the things that inspire him creatively these days. Gary Watson, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Look, the reason I reached out to you is because, I look for a lot of guests on LinkedIn, and you're pretty active on there publishing stuff. And there's a remarkable amount of great work that you've been a part of. That's the first reason why I wanted to have you on. And the second reason was that I've always found you to have strong opinions. And I figured,
Me?
Yeah. Well, so I figured, let's get you on and see what you can sound off on.
Okay.
So we're going to explore a number of topics today, but I always like to start with, how you got your start in the business. Did you always have advertising on your mind? I mean, I actually took an advertising course at Centennial when I started, but a lot of people kind of fall into the business and come at it from different directions. What was your situation?
Yeah, I mean, when I started out, there were no Humber copywriting programs. There were no sort of advertising programs at colleges. I mean, there was OCAD, but that was kind of for the artists and, the graphic designers. So I went to York University to pursue a business degree and follow in the footsteps of my father. But as it turned out, after my first year doing economics, I'm like, I can't do this. All these formulas I have to remember. When am I going to use this stuff? Consumer theory, corporate finance. So I started spending a lot of time at the radio station there. At that point, they'd kind of lost their license, so it was just a campus-based radio station. So things were a little looser. Our pop machine had beer in it, for example, in the Fanta.
Wow, that's like, yeah, you're breaking all sorts of laws.
I know, it's crazy. It's university. Anyway, I spent a lot of time there. I ended up getting a show there on Wednesday nights, a 3-hour show, and I started doing bumpers for my own radio show to promote it, and it was with those big carts, those plastic carts. Right. But I used to my friend had a 4-track Tascam, so I used to create my own little bumpers on cassette at home, use a vocoder, make cool sound effects, and then I used to take it in and record it onto the promo tapes for the station. And that sort of got me into the whole commercial production end of things, but I didn't even know that, what I was doing really. Then I thought to myself, if I'm doing this for my own show, maybe I can do some stuff for quid pro quo for maybe some pubs on campus. So I went and talked to the managers at like the Cock and Bowl and the Orange Snail. And I said,
pretty entrepreneurial.
Yeah. Hey, listen, if I do some little ads for you, could you comp me some beers on like Thursday nights? And that's a win-win situation. So I ended up doing some little commercials for those pubs. And, but at the time I had no clue that, this would lead to a career in advertising. It was just something I was doing for fun.
So how did you write those? I mean, they just let you do anything you wanted, or what did you think? Like, how did you sell the pub?
Yeah, it was more like Thursday night was game night or something like that. I can't recall.
Get a bucket of Coronas.
Yeah, something like that. Whatever the cheapest swill was, a bucket of beer or whatever it was at the time. But yeah, I think they were like game nights and trivia nights, things like that. So.
Okay, so what happened after that?
Well, I happened to be working in the summer at my dad's, he worked for a biotech company, and I was working in shipping and receiving. Yay. As it turned out, one of his salesman's partners worked at an agency in downtown Toronto I forget the name of the agency. Her name was June Smith. And she said, listen, why don't you come down and talk to our creative director? So I'm like, sure, nothing else to lose. I certainly have to get going on a career at some point. So I remember going down there and walking in the boardroom, and there's this, older guy there. His name was Jack Bush. As it turns out, he was a bit of a legend in the business. He'd done like the Carling Red Cap anthem campaign with Terry O'Malley, kind of a burn back era madman. And I had no clue, but I'm listening to him talk, and he's asking me questions like, what do you like to do? I'd already, I've always written lyrics in a band and stuff like that, and poetry, which was the only class in university I got an A+ in. And so I said, these are the things I kind of like doing. Is have you ever thought of being a copywriter? I'm like, what's that?
Right.
So then he sort of showed me, some of the work that they were doing at the agency, talked about what a copywriter did. And I'm kind of like, yeah, that's kind of cool. He said, listen, my advice for you would be to try and get in-house at, Eaton's or the Bay or Sears, because again, at the time, getting into a top tier agency without any experience at all.
No portfolio.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
No
where this was a grooming place where I could go. And as it turns out, lots of other people I know were there at the same time, including Zach Marouet, Chris McGrody, Dale Roberts. So there was a group of us that kind of went through Sears at the same time. I remember going in and writing a copy test, and they give you a character count, and they tell you like, here's a hammer. You've got 25 characters to write in a headline. It's kind of like writing for social copy right now, but it was like catalog writing. So I did the copy test. I ended up getting a job there, and that was kind of my first exposure to advertising as a profession.
I mean, that sounds like a lot of characters for a hammer. What did you go with?
I
nice
can't remember.
Wood handle.
Yeah.
Nicely weighted.
Good for killing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
If you're in a John Wick movie.
Yeah.
I forget what it was. I think I also had to do one for a fridge and a mattress or something like that. It was one of those things that you really learned the economy of words,
Right.
like how to sell in the shortest number of words possible, because you had to be very efficient with your words, because you weren't getting like a full page to do an ad. You were talking a small block of copy in a catalog.
Well, and I don't know if the radio experience helped you in that regard, but I spent a lot of time writing for radio, and it is one of those vicious things where you just can't be long, because the clock will just tell you that you're long,
exactly.
and you're kind of screwed. So did that help you at all with the catalog thing, being efficient with your words?
I think so. I mean, even now, I think simplicity and being very specific with what you say and how you say it is becoming really important. People just don't have a lot of time, and visual language is getting really important. Sometimes words aren't what they used to be. You don't see those wonderful long copy print ads anymore. So it's really about making sure that you're very efficient and precise with what you have to say. So I think that experience at Sears did influence my writing style and even some of the stuff I'm doing now, ironically.
So what do you do now? Like so you have a portfolio filled with catalog ads, or were you doing other spec ads on the side to flesh out your portfolio?
Yeah, well, I didn't really know exactly what a portfolio entailed. But I do remember a couple of meetings that I had before getting the first job, and one was with Jeffrey Roche, and I remember walking in there with my cobbled together portfolio, and he kind of looked at it, went through it all, was very quiet, and then kind of said to me, "Have you ever considered another career?"
In true Roshian style.
Yeah, but like it was not spiteful or anything. I think he was being really honest. He said, "Look," he said, "have you studied advertising? Do you know Bill Bernbach, David Abbott? Do you pick up annuals like One Show, CA?" He said, "You kind of got to know what great advertising is if you want to be in the business." And I hadn't really done my homework. I'll be perfectly honest. But it was a real moment for me that kind of went, wait a sec, I need to do something differently. And I got really, really fortunate by meeting Tom Gowdy at Y&R shortly thereafter. And he went through my book, which I'd kind of tweaked a little bit after my experience with Mr. Roche. And I think he saw something there. He said, look, it needs work, no doubt about it. He said, but I'd love to help you. So he would give me assignments, go off and do some headlines for a Mustang. There's this cool little record store called Cactus Records. Write some headlines for some vinyl and things like that. So I'd go away and I'd do the assignments and I'd bring them back, and Tom would critique them. And then he would even turn the stuff over to Clark Smith, who was his partner at the time, to have them typeset. Which, like, back in the day, typesetting was not like, let's go on a computer and like spit something out. Like, it was set by hand. So I ended up, after working with Tom and Clark, with a pretty, sweet looking book. And I think it was literally within 2 or 3 months after I'd sort of finished the process with him that I got my first job at V&B in 1990. So this is officially 30 years of advertising agency experience.
Well, we definitely share that in common. Tom Gowdy helped me immensely when I was just getting started. I was working at the mailroom in Chiat, and he was a senior creative there, and I expressed an interest in it. But he had a reputation for that too. That everybody had said that Tom Gowdy was great with juniors. He's very helpful, and he tortured other art directors. Hey, we got some ads here, but we need you to art direct them, and he helped put together my first portfolio and got me my first job at Y&R.
Wow.
So, he's legendary for that. And a great person to learn from. Like, he was very strategic, probably one of the strongest strategic creative people I've ever met. So we share that in common. So V&B. So, so tell me, because I see you as a freelancer first. Was it early in your career you decided to do that, or did you hang out at agencies for a decade or so before you went out?
I mean, I've only really been freelancing for the last maybe 7 years, and it's kind of been on and off. I was the type of guy that would go into an agency and, grow there. I was at Ambrose Carr for 7 years. I was at Publicis for 2. Then McLaren McCann for 4, and then Boss for 8. So I wasn't really, I was the type of person that would like to go in and be a part of, be a part of something, like help grow something or change something, or, just be a part of the culture. But freelance became more of a reality for me after Boss and Dentsu acquisition. And then, I figured it's time for me to go out and really spread myself around a little bit. I did a few stints, short term, like 7 or 8 months, at shops that specialized in experiential marketing, shopper marketing, promotional marketing. I figured, if all this stuff is happening, I should probably stick a few more tools in my toolbox, because, I want to be open to as many freelance opportunities as possible. And, I just didn't want to be known as, oh, you're the TV, print, radio guy. So, it was really important, I think it was 2012 to 2016 to go out and take a look around and actually get real immersive experience in different, channels, as opposed to, just traditional integrated advertising agency experience.
I did a very short period of freelance before I moved to New York, and was in New York for a few years. But there was a transition period between Chiat and going down to work for Gray in New York. And the one thing, my short amount of experience doing freelance work, the one thing that I thought was great was, because you were brought in and you weren't a permanent fixture there, you kind of avoided a lot of the politics that was going on within the department itself. You were kind of protected from that. You were a hired gun. You came in, you did your work. You didn't really get caught up in all that stuff. Has that been your experience too? Or have you had long stints where you do kind of get roped into the political nature of some departments?
I mean, there's plus and minuses of freelancing. Obviously, I think one of them is exactly as you say. You kind of go in and you do what you're hired to do, which is work, and it's what they're paying you for, not to sort of, get into, the politics or the dynamics, I'll say, of an agency and the people who are operating within it. At the same point, there's a lot of stuff about freelancing that I miss. I miss strategy. As a creative, I've always felt an affinity for strategy, because at the end of the day, if I have to work on it, I better make sure that I have a strategy that I can work with. So I've always been very involved, and there's been places where I've kind of looked at the brief and kind of went, who signed off on this? No, it doesn't happen a lot, but again, being not involved in strategy is something I miss. Production side is also something I miss. A lot of freelancers go in and they get to sort of develop the concepts and the language and the scripts, but perhaps not being able to execute it, which is another side that I miss. Although I have to say, there have been some places I've worked that I've done right from the beginning all the way through to the delivery of the final material, which has been amazing. I'll cite Zulu in particular. I spent over a year there, and that was a great experience for me. It's particularly at this point in my career. It was a little bit of creative rebirth, in that respect. And just amazing opportunities. And, that's a lot of the work that you've been seeing on LinkedIn was, I had the good fortune of doing with some exceptionally talented people at Zulu. So
yeah, it's a great agency doing great work. So off camera, we were talking a little bit about how certain aspects of the business have changed a lot coming from the production side. For me, I know that, things aren't the way they used to be. A lot of fragmentation of media, which in turn has meant fragmentation of budgets. And so what's your take on the business right now? I mean, you have the advantage of being around since the 90s. And then here we are 2020, 30 years later, certainly seen a lot of changes in the business. One of the things I bring up more recently is this more of this in-house kind of agency being created, of a lot of senior creators being plucked from agencies and create their own departments, whether it's at big banks or elsewhere.
Yeah, and lots of newer boutique agencies, right? There seems to be one popping up every few months, which I think is great. I mean, I think it's wonderful to see places like The Garden open up, Juliet,
right.
Good and Ready. These are places that are headed up by some pretty formidable talent. And, obviously they decided to strike out on their own for the same reasons that, people like Zach did 11 years ago. The industry's changed a lot. As you said, production has changed. I think client agency relationships have changed. They tend to be a little bit more transactional, for lack of a better term, than as immersive as they used to be. I mean, back in the day,
right.
We could go into a client with, one idea with a great deal of conviction. And because, we had a very close relationship, the trust would be there. I'm not saying the trust doesn't exist anymore between clients and agencies. That's what I'm getting at. But when it becomes transactional in nature, or when everything's on a project base now, which it is, gone are the days of here's your $35,000 a month retainer. Right. It does create a different dynamic, because you don't have that sense of building and growing together as an agency and a brand that perhaps it used to be. Because if I'm paying you on a project by project basis, there is always that project where I might go, oh, you know what, maybe we'll give these guys a try with that. And of course that happens, and we all know it happens. But I think that's definitely changed a lot. And that's probably affected agencies' bottom lines and their ability to retain really senior level staff, because, their baselines in terms of, revenue have been affected by sort of the project-based model.
Let's talk a little bit about new media, because, we own the National Advertising Challenge, and most of the ideas are articulated in digital form more than ever before. We don't really get a lot of television scripts or radio scripts or traditional media, maybe a little bit of out of home. But as a senior person who's used to or has a pedigree of traditional, and then the advent of new media, do you find a lot of the work that you do now is almost nothing to do with non-traditional?
No, it's a bit of a mix. But whether the medium is like experiential or whether it's a digital medium or a PR play, I think fundamentally it still comes down to just what's the insight. They may be different in different channels, like how we're trying to reach someone in a digital channel. The insight may be different than how you reach them, in say TV or something. But fundamentally, it's still about insights and connecting with people. It's just the channels have changed, but I think the insight and the execution on that insight still needs to be, that human truth, that whether, no matter what medium you're in, you're going to understand what we're trying to make you feel or do. I don't think that's changed fundamentally. It's just the channels have changed and there's just a lot more of them.
The one thing that I've noticed over the years is that, it used to be that you could open up a CA or another award annual. And when you saw traditional media, it just seemed to be so much easier to see, the insight being crystal clear. Mm-hmm. Take outdoor, for example, you're going to see what it is right there in 7 words or less. Yeah. And now I think there's like some really brilliant, digital campaigns, but you really do have to immerse yourself in it. Like, in other words, you have to read the idea in order to kind of look at it and go, oh, wow, this is really amazing.
Yeah. Or watch the case study video.
Yeah, that's right. There's all
because that kind of crystallizes it really nicely if, in under like 2 minutes. So, and there's been some amazing ones done. It just gives you a little more depth because like you say, a lot of those, the data or whatever they're pulling from isn't readily seen by the average consumer. It's how the data or whatever the insights they're drawing from influences the actions they do in those spaces. So they're not as visible as, say, here's my billboard, advertising a Big Mac for, $3.99 or what have you.
Yeah. I've got 3 kids. I imagine if I approached them now and I said, tell me about advertising, what's advertising? I'm sure they would have a completely different take on what it is. I'm not even sure if they would even kind of know what it is. I mean, it's... I guess it's those things that they see on YouTube before the thing that they want to see comes on.
The annoying pre-roll.
Yeah, that's right.
The forced pre-roll. Where's the skip ad?
Yeah.
I think that, I have 2 millennials at home and, brands are still important. They still make choices on brands, but how the brands are influencing them is a lot different, I think, than, the power of like the traditional TV campaign. It's just they're happening in different spaces.
Do you find yourself in a room talking to clients where you're having to answer tough questions about return on investment as it relates to new media? I mean, I think there's a certain level of client that sort of looks at it like cost of doing business.
Yeah.
But those old metrics that used to be, we were talking about it the other day. Outdoor boards at a certain location, they're going to run their numbers and they're going to say, this is how many people are going to see it.
Yeah.
You're going to pay for it for a certain amount of time and then it's going to be gone. And now we kind of have this other medium where it's hard to know, unless it's just me, it's hard to know what those impressions mean.
It's not just that too, but there's been so much that's come out about false reporting in the digital space, mm-hmm. whether it's like views on a pre-roll video or a video, or it's been click-throughs. There is a lot of questions being raised about what really are we getting from our digital spend. How can we validate those as being influential, especially when we're seeing like really inflated numbers? And there's been a lot of global clients that are kind of calling it out now and saying, hey, wait a second, we need a bit more accountability on what we're seeing here in terms of numbers on our digital spends. So, there's skepticism on the client side, mm-hmm. as well.
What do you think is the most exciting thing going on in our space right now, in the advertising space? Because with this fragmentation of media, I mean, one thing that I kind of harp on a lot is this, like, the formats have been kind of blown up a little bit. It used to be you needed the discipline to get your idea across in 30 seconds. And I think when you're a young creative, you know, you resist that a little bit. You're like, oh, if only I worked in Britain where they could do 45 seconds or something, this would be perfect. And knowing that 30 seconds is a very tough right in the first place. But I think I marvel at the other aspects or these other medias now that you're not really locked into those specific time frames, and that should equate to more creativity or less. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not too sure about what the next thing is going to be. You know, I mean, 10 years ago they said, "Oh, TV's dead." TV's clearly not dead. Still a lot of, you know, media being poured into it. I think the one area for me that is really still largely untapped is branded content. I mean, really, let's be honest. The last time we saw really like super amazing branded content was like 2001. BMW did the heist, and I don't think it's ever been replicated to the same level of success. And not just because it had amazing directors and actors and things like that, but just the real integration of the product in storytelling in a longer format. I think that is an area of massive opportunity for clients also that don't want to treat it like a 4-minute ad.
Right.
So I think, you know, especially with the launch of like Quibi and things like that are doing longer format, you know, shows and serial shows, I would hope that advertisers would be able to find a way to, you know, do some really interesting branded content and develop it and put money behind it, and, you know, use that as a true vehicle for marketing and communications, as opposed to, you know, what they've been doing for the last 20, 30 years.
We're talking right now about how the industry is, you know, is always in kind of flux and reinventing. I think one of the topics that we talked about off camera was the individual's ability to reinvigorate themselves and to change themselves. I think you talked a little bit about reinvention offline a little bit. For you as a freelancer, talk to me about that. Like, do you feel that there's an increased pressure from you to do that constantly so that you're marketable?
Yeah, a little earlier, I just kind of touched on the fact that, you know, having gone out and got some additional experience outside of what I would call traditional advertising, you know, so actually going out and doing XM work and working at an agency that does it, actually working at a branded content entertainment agency, actually working at a social digital shop. That's been a way for me to constantly be not just like outside looking in at what's happening in these areas like XM and whatnot, but actually participating and being a part of it and learning how to ideate for it and learning how to execute it. So that has definitely been something that I've used to my advantage in terms of my ability to, you know, it opens up more of a bandwidth for me on the types of projects I can work on. And I think the other thing too is just, you know, keeping current, you know, culture, tech. Not that you need to know everything about the latest new this or that, but you need to know about what everyone's doing with it, you know. You know, fashion, music, like all these things. I think the moment that you kind of stop looking at culture and what's happening around you and what people are doing around you with their technology or online or offline, then the risk of stagnation and becoming obsolete increases exponentially.
Yeah, well, maybe that's a good segue to talk a little bit about this idea of ageism. I mean, when there's been a number of cases that not long ago, when I worked at Chiat, there was an interim creative director by the name of Duncan Milner. He had gone through a fairly public scenario not long ago. I think it was an Ad Age where, you know, he had felt like he was getting pushed out a little bit early, and that made headlines and news and stuff like that. I know that you have certain opinions about it too, and it seems as though it's on the radar. It seems as though people are talking about it. I know there's that agency fairly recently that has been started. That it's
Fearless started.
Yeah, everyone's
Fearless
over 50
started
or something
in the States, and
yeah,
you know they came out with that. Their, I guess, call to action. Whenever ever wondered what happened to all those great creatives in their 40s and 50s,
right?
They came to work with us. You know. a few weeks ago, I guess maybe a month ago, I guess now, 3 guys in the UK opened up a shop called Ancient and Modern. Average age of the partner is 64, billing themselves as the oldest agency in London, which is a nice little cheeky play on words. But yeah, I mean, the reality is I know a lot of people who've left the business to pursue other things. Ageism, I think it was Forbes that came out in 2016. They did a survey. They found out that less than 5% of people in advertising agencies were over 50. Now, compare that to other industries, and it's really low number. And there's a whole lot of factors for that. I'm sure there's economic factors, revenue factors. But the reality is it's out there, and it's the elephant in the room. But it's a good thing that people are starting to talk about it, get it out there, put it out there. I mean, I've experienced it personally. I remember being in an interview, and I'm not going to say names or agencies, but I was literally told, quote, they were looking for someone of a younger vintage, end quote. I kid you not.
You probably didn't laugh in that moment. It's kind of an odd thing to say.
Yeah, no, it is definitely. The term a younger vintage. It's like, no, if you're talking the wine analogy, actually the older vintages are better, but okay.
I didn't even think that was legal. It was the equivalent of saying we were looking for someone better looking.
Yeah. Anyway, it happened. So, but you kind of you move on, right? I mean, the reality is you can kind of go into the corner, lick your wounds, or leave the industry with your tail between your legs, or you can just kind of go, okay, well, if this is a reality, let's deal with it and, keep relevant and keep doing good work whenever the opportunity presents itself. But yeah, it's a real thing. I don't think anything has radically changed from 2016 Forbes study. It may have bumped up a couple more percentage points, but I mean, you were talking about Duncan Milner. I mean, I remember, almost every agency I worked for in the 90s and 2000s, there was always that that elder sage creatively that was there. Like V&B, it was like Terry O'Malley, Alan Kazimir at DDB, Ron Woodall at PJ. Not that I worked there, but he was there. Paul Lebois. I mean, these are people who were the creative sort of godfathers of the agencies from which, grew out of their philosophy, their mentorship, their vision. And you don't see a lot of that anymore in agencies.
I'll tell you a quick story that will segue into my next question about this subject. It wasn't that long ago where I was at a production company was doing a summer party, the Spy Films Party, right? Which
Spy in July.
That's right. If you're a Toronto person and you're in the ad business, then you know that this is an annual kind of a big party that happens now. So I'm in line waiting to get in, and there's a guy standing behind me, and I get into this conversation about him. Really nice guy. He's got like a backpack on, he's wearing Tevas, and he's got a baseball cap on, and and I'm not judging anybody's wardrobe or anything, but I said, so what do you do? And he goes, well, I'm a creative director. And at that moment, I was like, wow, things have changed so much. I mean, when I got into the business, the creative director drove a Porsche. His sports jacket was like $3,000 or $4,000, and he wouldn't be caught dead standing in line to get into an industry party. And here we are, the guy's in Tevas, and he's like, he's a creative director at a fairly well-known agency too. So, my next, where I'm going with this is, how much do you think economics is driving that? Like, as you ascend in your career, clearly you're demanding more and more monies. If there's a downward pressure on the business itself, it goes, it stands to reason that they would look at their bottom line and they would go, look, if we're going to pick some people off, how about these guys at the top? I mean, they're pretty expensive people.
Yeah.
So, how do you balance this idea of, well, maybe I'm being discriminated against because of my age, when maybe it's just that you're like, look, there's too much freight.
I think a lot has to do with the latter point. I think that at the end of the day, they're all businesses, right? I mean, they have a P&L just like clients have a P&L. So, when difficult decisions need to be made, yeah, it becomes that. It's a bunch of numbers on a wall. And it's like, hey, look, we need to strike some salaries off our bottom line here. And that's business, like it is what it is. And man, it's happened to me several times over my career where a piece of business has been lost, or there's been an acquisition, or an agency has dissolved. And it's just kind of like a fact of life, or just, part of being in the business. So, decisions are made, and, you kind of, I never would hold a grudge against that. It's kind of like you did what you needed to do. I've never left anywhere like really, in those situations, whether it's been agency has like gone away, like Cap C. I mean, I'm still, in touch with Tony Chapman, and, still Claude Carrier. I still have a great deal of respect from him after Boss sold to Dentsu. So, for me, it's part of business. It's unfortunate, but, economics are economics.
Another thing I've harped on like over and over, I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing it, but this hollowing out of the middle in terms of creative departments. So you have young juniors who are working there, or young creatives working there. There's a cost savings in not having intermediates in there, and then having senior level people who can handle the big fires, handle the big meetings. There's a bit of loss of mentorship, I think, in the middle there now. If we're on this subject of ageism and having less and less experienced people there, do you think the industry has suffered in any way? Do you think that's a factor in maybe the work not being as good maybe as it was before? I do feel like not to throw too many things at you at once, but like I think without that mentorship there and technology being such that you can execute things that at such a high level, that maybe on the strategic stage that we've lost a little bit of that really strong strategic thinking that is earned over time.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in, but let me try and tackle it one thing at a time. The role of mentorship in agencies, I think, is really important. Because I'm not really getting involved with, as a freelancer, involved with the structures of creative departments, I'm not really, don't have a lot of insight in terms of the discrepancy between the hollowing out of the middle. I know that intermediates have always been the hardest role to fill, like, in terms of where the junior talent and the senior talent, definitely there is that divide, and the middle is the toughest part to fill, because there's a lot of people that are quite junior that get escalated really quickly into a more senior role, perhaps earlier than how things used to be. And at the same point, there's a lot of people in the senior level that have been sort of bypassed really quickly from junior, like intermediate, like they spend like a year there, and it's like, okay, now you're senior, or like senior, or you're going to be an ACD. But mentorship is super important, and I think any agency that's worth its salt still invests in mentorship. I think one of the biggest problems is just time. Like you were saying, like, the time crunches of like going to market, and the technologies make things so much faster, and solutions are expected so much faster from clients, that a lot of that time that used to be spent mentoring and like going through the process of sitting down with the team and saying, hey, look, this is why what you're showing me isn't really working for this reasons, that as much of that stuff is definitely not happening, I would say, just from my observations. But I think it's due to quick turnarounds, not really having the time to, man, used to get like 6 weeks on a brief, right? Like, and then stuff would be not going into market for like 9 months. Now stuff's going into market in like 9 days. And, so as things have gotten faster, I think that the process and a lot of the good things that happen in that process, the being able to walk away from an idea and let it percolate for a little while and then come back and beat it around a bit more. And a lot of that sitting down with other people and, workshopping ideas, not brainstorming, like where you get a bunch of people in a room and try and solve a problem in an hour, but just like workshopping your ideas, peer review, a lot of stuff like that. The timelines are really, unfortunately, kind of working against some of those best practices that used to be sort of the hallmarks of agencies.
I know a lot of people have opinions about this. I mean, whether or not shorter time frames equate to better creative, because there's that, I had to work with an account guy who always used to say pressure makes diamonds. As you know, when anybody would complain that the turnaround was too quick. But I guess it's a combination of the two, right? And maybe these long lead times don't necessarily equate to better work in the end, because you could probably get into a pretty good spiral after a while. And I certainly think about the creative departments when I first came into the business, and the 3 martini lunch was a real thing.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You could arguably say when times were really good and there was a lot of money in the business that it wasn't maybe the most efficient thing. But then a lot of the romance of the business was kind of, I think, is kind of gone. And I hope I don't feel too old when I say that. But those characters and those 3 martini lunches and those big agency parties and dues really did equate to a lot of great stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. I mean, it's definitely not the same industry it used to be. I'd say there aren't the characters there used to be, like the Gary Prouks of the world, and and even Jeffrey Roche, and there's not as many of those kind of characters. But
they'd be fired by HR.
Yeah.
Right?
But again, culture leaders and visionaries and people that had a very, firm understanding of what they wanted their agency to be, and the type of work they wanted to do. There's agencies that used to have a certain look to their stuff.
Right.
Like Fallon in Minneapolis you knew it was a Fallon ad,
Sure.
CP&B, when they first started out, you kind of went, oh, I knew that came out of CP&B.
Harrod and Merlin, when they were really banging on all cylinders, you could usually see that
Levi's
it was them.
Stuff. And But I don't know if there's really an agency I can think of right now, with maybe the exception of like Gut in Miami or David, that has a real, like, this is kind of our thing, this is our, our calling card, our tone, our style. And, because then you tend to attract clients that want similar things. Everyone's not going, I want my subservient chicken. I'm sure like CP&B got a ton of, I want my subservient chicken, but fundamentally people are asking for work that breaks norms and disrupts things and does things differently. And I don't know if there's an agency I could really put my finger on right now, except for the aforementioned ones. Particularly, I would say in Canada, you'd say, I know this agency by their work, immediately recognizable, because it says this looks like it came from X, Y, or Z.
Well, I don't think it could be. I mean, it's harder and harder to do that. I think one of the things that drives that is this disposable nature of the things that we consume now, because they're produced in such short periods of time, and they reach markets so quickly and so frequently. I mean, I think the traditional model of a television ad and a outdoor board and a radio spot that was consistently supported over time kind of occupied a little bit of your brain for a while. Well, and now those things can be here and gone in like a millisecond. And they are. And they
in
are.
6 seconds, in fact.
Yeah, that's right.
On your Snapchat story or your Instagram story or whatever.
That's so true. So it's yet another challenge. I mean, I'm sure if you're an agency owner, wanting, for agencies, that's their calling card. It's like, to your point, they see the work, clients see work that they love. I wish we were doing that, so let's give them a call. And now you have just this onslaught of work that you see so often. And it's not like the percentage of shit has gone down. There's still a pretty good helping of it going on. It just seems to be, the volume of it just seems to be unbelievable.
Yeah. It's funny because, people always talked about British advertising and how great British advertising was. Well, I don't know how many people sat in living rooms in the UK watching British advertising in like the 90s or 2000s, but most of it was absolute crap. But it's British advertising. Canadian advertising, there are spots that are on TV that I see that I just go like, wow, that's amazing. It might not happen as often as it used to happen. But there's still, a lot of like amazing work being done here, and work that's worthy of, global recognition.
Right. Yeah, I know. I was having this conversation recently with someone where it's sort of like, when I work with Terry O'Reilly, he always used to have this saying where it's like, you throw enough $100 bills at a wall, some of them are going to stick.
Yeah.
And, in that radio business, if someone came in and wanted to talk about a jingle or something, like they would often bring up something like Pizza, or they would bring up something like Sleep Country Canada. And,
yes.
and that's where, if you, the creative types might look at it and kind of go, well, gosh, it's not the greatest work in the world.
Yeah.
But with the right media buy, you can pound that into, someone's brain 24/7, and
Sure.
you're going to occupy a part of their brain after that.
Yeah. Or you can look at it as an opportunity to take that jingle and do something different with it.
Right.
There's been a few campaigns that have been done using music that you would go, oh, that's really funny. I mean, Real Man of Genius, Bud Light is like, that was hilarious. But
Whoever wrote that
it was all jingle
yeah,
based. But
yeah.
I mean, that was kind of the epitome of like just brilliant writing done against like what you'd think would be a horribly cheesy bad jingle.
Yeah, that's right. And an amazing voiceover. And Pete Stacker, just
Yeah.
an incredible guy in Chicago. So I've always looked at the freelance stable as somewhat small. Has that been your experience? Like, do you get a lot of repeat business as a freelancer, or because I do see it that way? It's like, okay, if we've gone with Gary before and we like the work that he does, then surely they must call you again.
Yeah, I mean, the freelance pool is huge. It's bigger than it's ever been for a lot of reasons. But I think the toughest thing is getting on the roster, right? Getting that sort of line of sight and your name sort of moving up. Because there are agencies that have their go-tos, which I've thankfully been one at Zulu. But wherever you go, I mean, it comes down, it's the same thing, right? It's like timing and who you know. So networking is super important. LinkedIn can be a good tool, but just reaching out, finding the email addresses of creative resource managers, talking to the ECDs or the CDs there, making those connections, like it's super important. And then it's timing is like,
sure.
Hey, look, your name came up, and then once you go in there, it's just the same old thing it's ever been. Just like do good work and don't be an asshole. It's like,
right.
Because you can do good work, but if you're difficult to work with, there's other freelancers that we can bring in that are equally as talented. Or if your work's not good, then you're just not going to get a call back. So it's funny because even freelancing, the same principles apply as they do in working full time. Really,
I was having this conversation with my wife this morning because I talked to her mom about those times it'll be 3 a.m. you can't sleep and all your problems are right in your face.
Yeah, 4:30 for me.
Right, yeah. And you're just really wired about the whole thing. And she said, that's never happened to me. And short of me leaping across the table and wanting to strangle her because I was like, that's me every night.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the phone not ringing and not pushing too hard when, as you say, it's all about need and timing and avails?
Yeah. It's taken me quite a while, and I still don't know if I'm there. I've been fortunate that I've been relatively steady and relatively busy as a freelancer. But yeah, I mean, there was a couple of weeks at the beginning of January that weren't really busy. Mm-hmm. And, I want to be busy, so I do other things, which is good because, I think if you're creative, you need to find creative outlets anyway. It doesn't matter whether it's advertising or something else. But yeah, it's definitely a shift in mindset. That you're not going to do on Monday morning, you're not getting on a train to go to your full-time job. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a shift in mindset, something I'm still grappling with. But I also haven't totally written off, going back to full-time as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, like I said, there's a lot about agencies that I do miss. I miss a lot of the cultural aspects of it. I do miss the strategy, the production, the camaraderie, which, I've been fortunate in the agencies I've freelanced at. I've been able to sort of immerse myself really quickly and into what's going on. But, there's still something about full-time that has a great appeal to me. Who knows what the future is going to hold, but we'll see.
I ask everybody who comes on, for people who want to get into the business, I don't know who your mentor was. I think you've mentioned a couple of them today, but what are the key pieces of advice you would give someone who wants to do what you've done?
Wow, that's a tough question. I think just it's all about passion. If you're really passionate about going into this industry, just do it. I mean, I'm not going to talk someone out of it. I'm not going to say, hey, look, at 45 years old, you better start looking for a plan
Start
B.
There. I'm not going to talk you out of this.
Yeah. It's like, listen, if you really want to do this, no, I would probably give them the same advice that Jeffrey gave me back in the days. Like, learn what great work is, go and study it, and, find out what's been sort of heralded as the best work around the world for the past decade, and go out and talk to people, have coffees with people. There are people that still will sit down and spare half an hour of their day. And then after you have all those conversations and after you take a look around, you decide if, that's something that's right for you. I still love the business. I haven't fallen out of love with it. I still love ideating. I still love writing, which is something I've never stopped doing my entire career. I mean, even as like a CD or an ECD, I've always taken on projects myself. So, just to keep sharp. So yeah, that's one thing I tell anyone at any point in their career, like, just keep working, keep doing work. Yeah.
You must work with a lot of millennials. Is the knock on millennials and their work ethic, is that hold any water, or?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so, particularly in our industry, because everyone's pretty driven. So, do people maybe want a bit more of a life now than, because, when we were in the business, you'd be there.
Heard you went to a movie this weekend, Watson. What's the deal?
16 hours a day. And then, I remember working on pitches till like 3 a.m. and then going back and being there the next morning at 8 o'clock in the morning again. Sure. So I think that if anything, what this generation has taught us, or hopefully is sending some messages, is like, let's get this balance in check here. Like, it's great to be passionate about the business, but you need to have a life. And I think a lot of millennials have been knocked for like not wanting to hang around late on nights and work weekends. And you know what? Good for them.
Right. Yeah, it's good. It's good advice. So what do you do now that kind of gets your creative juices flowing? Is there something you do in your spare time?
Yeah. As I said, if I'm not being creative, doing advertising, like there's other things I do. And so there's 3 things. One, I've been doing music most of my life. I've recently sort of got on this kick of like doing covers of 80s bands, which the last 5 weeks I've released a new cover every Saturday or Sunday. That's been a blast. I have a SoundCloud account, so I post up on there on Facebook, and people are enjoying them, so that's good. It gives me great personal satisfaction doing music. This is going to sound really cliched, but I am writing a novel, and it's not a memoir of advertising. I don't think we need another one of those.
You're supposed to write what you know, so I'm interested to know what the subject matter is.
This isn't really my own story, but it's kind of loosely based on a story of a friend of mine in high school that went to Thailand, met a woman, ended up buying a piece of property there, and then kind of ran afoul of local police and ended up getting sort of told to leave the house. So it's called English as a Second Language. It's kind of loosely based on that. So I'm up to like 50,000 words now, but now I have to rip it apart and try and get another 25,000 words before I go to an editor with it. So there's that. And then finally, just launched a TV and film incubator or development company called Gas Bottle Jack with my creative partner, David Tennant, who is a director. And we have about 4 different sort of show Bible concepts in the works being shopped. We actually have a development deal signed on one of them right now. So that's super exciting. And who knows, that may be my plan B. That's
right.
You're never too old. If you're behind the camera in Hollywood, it's too old. You can be as old as you want. But, if you're in front of it, unless you're like Jack Nicholson.
Assuming you can't talk about any of it?
I can't, not at this point, but I'm sure, I'm very confident that, Gas Bottle Jack and some of our projects will definitely find the light of day. It's a very competitive industry, like anything is, but with all, the streaming services that are available, and the need for content, good content, is greater now than it's ever been.
Fantastic. Listen, Gary, thanks for coming on the show and talking to us.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
About your career and lots of great insights today. So, thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
This episode has been brought to you by the National Advertising Challenge, North America's only brief-based challenge that sends winners to Cannes, France.